in die Enge. Thank you very much. Und außerdem werden wir heute im Anschluss noch die Evaluierung machen und würden Sie bitten, da tatsächlich daran teilzunehmen. Es ist das erste Mal, dass die Vorlesung gelaufen ist. Wir brauchen Ihr Feedback, um zu verstehen, was in Ordnung, was hätten Sie sich noch gewünscht und was können wir im nächsten Jahr besser machen. Aber dazu später mehr. So, it is also my great pleasure and honor to introduce you to Professor Vero van den Abelen from KU Leuven, who is joining us today from Belgium to talk about player experience and how to measure it through surveys. So last week we already spoke about playtesting, games user research in general. Today we will dive into one of these topics in a lot more detail. She is one of the leading international experts on how to measure player experience, has extensively published in that area, has a history of being at CMU in the States as a Fulbright scholar, is a professor, but also at the same time UX director for Takerlist, a startup that is concerned with video recordings and the media. So also feel free to ask her anything after her talk about working in HCI related jobs in industry. But with that, I'd actually like to hand over to you. I will leave all of that here.
Perfect.
Just hide over there.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So it's nice that Catherine, Professor Gerling. Can I allow the students to know that I just address you as Catherine? Yes. Has already introduced me, but indeed, I have a bit of a mixed background. I'm currently a professor at the Department of Computer Science, very similar to yours, but I have a background in industrial design, interaction design, and I also am still very much practicing user experience design. So I cannot choose basically what I like most. But of course, as a professor, indeed, I am fascinated by how to motivate people to interact with certain devices, gamification, motivational design, and of course, really the hardcore player experience measurement. And I'm going to give you a talk today on how to measure player experience. And as you already could infer from the title of the slide, it's going to be about surveys. It's not a coincidence because actually one of my most cited papers is about one of these surveys to measure player experience. And if you look at the co-authors, you will also still recognize some other familiar names. So I did not do this alone. But so I will first give a general introduction and then we'll dive in and talk about this specific survey to measure player experience. We'll also talk about a variant of that scale. And throughout the lecture, I will also draw on some other sources, but these I will just briefly mention. So that's the sources and outline for today. But I want to start with a little bit of an interactive moment. And you guys, you just arrived in time. Because what I want you to do now is take a minute. And I want you to think about your favorite game of all time. And if you now panic because you don't have one favorite game of all time, just pick one. Yeah. But then think for yourself, what is it about that game that makes it your favorite or one of your favorites? Did you pick your game? Yeah. Do you know what it is about the game that makes it your favorite? All right, let's move on to the next question. How does it make you feel during the game, while you are playing? Okay. And how does it make you feel after the game? Now you're reflecting, and what emotional responses does it still trigger? Okay. And now you can turn to your next friend or the person sitting next to you and explain and see if he agrees that it's the best game of all time or whether they have a different game. So take like 30 seconds to have that discussion. Yeah. Okay. Nice, nice, nice. Actually, people in the back, can you hear me fine? Yeah, it's okay? All right, cool. So you now got to share these experiences with each other, but now I want to hear from you. So can you tell me what is your favorite game of all time? I want to hear some names of games. Stars of Valley? Stardew Valley, sorry, yes. Yeah. Other names, or did everyone pick the same game? Bottle? Ah, Portal, yes. Okay, yes, all right.
The Titanfall 2.
Titanfall 2. You can see I am not an active gamer anymore. I should be on top of these titles. Yes.
The Last of Us 2.
The Last of Us 2. All right. Other names?
League of Legends.
League of Legends, yes. All right. That I'm still very aware of. I have 2 teenage boys. League of Legends in my house, yes. Yeah.
Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2.
Mass Effect.
Mass Effect 2.
Mass Effect. Mass Effect, yes, sorry. It's my bad hearing, yes.
Quake 3.
Quake 3, really? All right. Okay. So we've got some games. Now I want to hear you explain for these games, what is it about the game? Can you describe what it is?
And Stardew Valley, I feel like the story never ends. Like there's always more to explore and do, and it's
Okay. The story never ends, so it's a very deep, elaborate game. Yes, all right. We had Portal.
Yeah, even though it is a puzzle game, you could say that after playing it one time, all the puzzles are already solved. There are always some tiny bit of details you could find, or some Easter eggs, or you could also try to play it even faster.
Okay.
Every time, and that's something that makes you come back every time.
Easter eggs, always more details to uncover. Yes. League of Legends.
Competition mastery, mostly.
Computational mastery.
No, competition mastery.
Ah, competition. Okay, but I want to hear you describe something in the game. You are describing.
The game is about competition mastery. You
Okay.
don't have a chance, and if you don't compete, you won't win.
And what in the game, what in the game is designed in such a way that it gives you that sense of mastery?
That you can kill your enemy, that you can destroy their enemy place.
Okay, yes.
It's all about knowing that it's enemy.
Yes, yes. So there's that mechanic in the game that you can kill your enemy, yes, in many different ways. All right. And Quake 3, as a last example, what is it about that game, Quake 3?
It's incredibly well balanced. So the items are placed in really good spots on the maps, and it's quite smooth actually when you kill your enemies. The weapons work well.
All right. So items are placed right at a right location, well balanced. All right. So now I want to hear about these feelings that you have during the gameplay. And we already heard that kind of mastery, but I would still say, like, while you're playing, what feelings does Stardust Valley give you?
So the way I play it, you can choose to play it differently. I play it in a very relaxed way.
Yeah.
Not stress myself.
Yeah.
Do everything in my time.
So it makes you, okay, yeah. We'll come to words for that feeling in a moment. You're not alone. Portal?
In the beginning, it was kind of puzzling because of the puzzle. But yeah, after playing it and coming back again, it is more like I don't know, a relaxed feel of discovering the planet, or in a way, there's kind of a lot of tension because I want to be faster every time. So yeah.
All right. Yes, so you want to beat yourself and be better every time. And in the beginning was puzzling, but you keep on feeling challenged, I guess. All right. League of Legends, you said, competition, mastery.
So for me, it really depends on the surroundings.
Okay.
Some days when I feel, I don't know, when I went to the workshop, for example, it might be when you do the close play and it feels really good and rewarding and just everything is right. And on other days, it might be extremely frustrating and distressing during the game. So it's really different depending on how the game goes and how the day was.
Okay. Yeah, we'll come back to that cycle of emotions that you're expressing. Yeah? But frustration is also part of it. Yeah. And still you come back to that game.
Oh, yes.
It can be so frustrated and still it's your favorite game of all times. Okay, time to move on. And what I wanted to point out with this first exercise is when you ask people for say something about your player experience, the type of answers they can give can vary widely, but they can sit at different levels. Some people, or in some settings, people will be inclined to describe things in the game. They will say it's awesome because it's got this VR and it's with a dance mat, or there's this apocalyptic setting, and they really describe things of the game, right? You could say these are attributes of the game. But some of you also said, because I like it because it's well balanced. I like it because it's never ending. I like it because it's puzzling. Here you're no longer just describing something of the game, you're actually already explaining what it does to you. But some of these descriptions of what it does to you really apply to during the game. It's like, it's easy to control and I can make the moves, but you're still really describing it, this kind of experience during the runtime of the game. And another word for that, you could call that functional consequences. Yeah? It's this really, during the game, the consequences of the way the game is designed, how that has consequences for you while gameplay. And then finally, and these we also heard, it's like mastery. I feel I'm on top of the world and it makes me feel like I'm really, at least in this aspect, better than everyone else. Yes, could be. Or I get this kind of Zen flow state. It relaxes me. These we call psychosocial consequences because it's not just describing your behavior during the game, but also sort of how it changes your being. It's an experience, but it's already sort of an experience that sort of transforms your state. It does something with you. It makes you feel more connected to your friends or to the world. Yes. And then finally, when you ask people for player experiences, they can also give answers like this. They can say, I really like the game because it helps you empathize with refugees. Yes. Because I find it important to train my brain. And here we talk actually about how this game provides something that aligns with values, with things that you find important in life, things that actually matter outside of the game. Take away that game and you still find these things important. So these exist separately from the game. So if you ask people for player experience, please help me understand your player experience, you can get a very rich, very different answer, not only in flow or immersion or it's about the controller or it's about the graphics, but also at the different levels. Yes, they can say something about the game itself, the attributes. They can say something about during the gameplay, functionally, how that has consequences for you. They can say something about how it changes you psychosocially, or they can even explain how it matters because of their values, right? And what I'm now actually, what I've given to you is actually primer into means end theory. If you are a designer, means end theory is a really important theoretical model for you, because it helps you understand how design choices matter because they provide benefits to users. And when you want to design something accordingly, or you want to design something for success, you actually really have to understand how these attributes, how these design choices provide certain benefits. Yes, so this is a framework that extends game design. You can also use it for other types of designs. But it's really important to understand that these answers can sit at different levels. And actually, we call it a means end chain. And if people give you an answer at a certain level, and I actually prompted the person who talked about League of Legends, because you immediately jump to the psychosocial consequences. I tried to make you descend. And I said, okay, but what is it? And then you said, well, you know, I can really kill a lot of people. Okay, I would say that that's sort of in between here, but I made you go down the chain. Sometimes if you do interview people, you want to make them come up the chain. Why do you like this game? Because it has a yellow bird. Okay, but why do you like the yellow bird? It reminds me of that character in Sesame Street. Why do you like that? I love Sesame Street, and to me, that's really an icon, and I like this reference in the game. All right, now we've come. Okay, why again am I sort of putting in a lot of time on this? Well, let's look at the official definition of player experience, or one of the official definitions, but this is one that is often used. And they say, well, it's an individual personal experience that players hold during the game or immediately after the game. And that's an interesting definition, because if you look at it in that way, actually, we know that we already have to exclude two of these. Game attributes, when you're polling for player experiences, you're not polling for game attributes. And personal values, from a means end theory perspective, they matter greatly. But if you look at this definition, they're not part of it. Just saying. All right. Okay. So I hope you understand, when you try to get answers out of people, try to understand, but why do you like this game, and help me understand. You already have to not only see, is it about flow or emergent, but also really understand this network of attributes, consequences, how they relate to each other. And actually, that it's a network and how they relate to each other is also emphasized by this model. It's a model put forward by Nicole Lazzaro. And interestingly, in academic research, it doesn't get that much attention. It was hyped for a while in 2006, but then it sort of got to the background. I like it a lot, that model, and there's a lot of things to be said. But basically, what that model shows is that there are actually cycles of player experiences that are chained together, and that when you are a designer, you actually have to try to understand how they are chained together. And remember, person from League of Legends, thank you for contributing that example. But you were saying, okay, sometimes I can play and I can get really frustrated. Part of that player experience is that frustration. It's essential, because if you don't have frustration first, you cannot get to fiero. And fiero is that moment that you managed to slay that person, to have that boss fight, and finally the Xth time you were able to kill that monster, you get this kind of proudness, fiero. I'm sure Germans also have a nice word for it, but in English they couldn't find a word, so Lazzaro used a Spanish word, but it's like this proudness because you overcame an obstacle. And that then goes with a tension relief. And then you start your next cycle. And that cycle is called hard fun. And probably you've already heard of it, but it is important to understand how they go together. Yes. You cannot achieve fiero if you have not first given frustration. The other one I also heard here with both with Portal, I think, and with Stardust, but it's more sort of this curiosity, like what is going to be there in the next level? Oh, so nice. Oh, and I can interact with that water tank too. Whoa, hey, an Easter egg. Yeah, that's this one. Yes, there's curiosity. What's here? Surprise. Huh? And I wonder, it's nice. Yeah. And you go in that cycle. But again, it's a cycle of emotions, and it matters. All right. So player experience, we already understand. It's at different levels. They're chained to each other. We academic researchers from psychological sciences would say it's a multi-dimensional construct because it can be both frustration and fiero. It's part of that player experience. So there are more than one dimension in player experience. It's not just I liked it and I didn't like it on a scale from 1 to 10. If you just measure that, that's a very superficial measurement. It's like the net promoter score, and you know that one on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is it that you would recommend this product to a friend, right? That's one dimension. Yes, I liked it or I didn't like it. But if you only measure player experience as one dimension, you're going to lose out on a lot. It's a multi-dimensional construct, and it's a dynamic construct. It sort of evolves over time. Yes, there are these cycles, so we also know that. And you also know that if you play the same game over and over, well, some of them, they last, some of them, they don't. Yeah. And then I want to stress this once more. Game design is second order design. And I give this example because Facade was actually a game that I came across in, I think, 2004 already. And it was the first game that I felt that was designed for me. And basically, it was at that moment groundbreaking because you could interact through natural language, and there was no ChatGPT yet. So 2004, think how old you were at that age. Yeah, it's a while ago. And what I loved about this game, because my brothers would play this type of game, and I think Professor Gerling would be a fan of this game. They loved it. It was all blood and gore and twitch speed, and I hated those kinds of games. And I'm also really bad at it. Yes, I love designing, but I don't function at twitch speeds. I think my brain, I just don't get these speeds. I'm awful with controllers where I have to press the right sequence of buttons at a certain time. And so my brother and I, we would take turns in these types of games. He would play for 2 hours, and then it was my turn. I would play for 2 minutes. He would take pity on me, and I would get to have another try, but then really his patience was over. So that was my game experience until this game. And here you play a therapist, and basically your job is to keep that couple together. But you have to sort of talk to them, and you have to sort of say you're a friend, and they're old friends of you. But basically you play the therapist, and you would say, "Okay, hi, da da da. So tell me what happened, and I can understand, da da da." And sort of, and then if you do it the right way, you balance. You cannot take sides. If you choose sides too, obviously they kick you out. But if you do it in the right way, not blaming, not taking balance, then they one of the two confesses the affair and blah blah blah, and you so the game is about not getting kicked out by one of them and having them expose what is going on, and I really like that, even though the graphics are hideous. Yes. And the funny thing is that actually not my brother, but another colleague, Bob de Schutter, yes, he then played that game because I was just going on about it. And I was like, Vero, I hate that game. It's horrible. And I'm always kicked out. And I explained to him, no. And he tried and tried, and he always kept being kicked out. And Professor Gerling is laughing because she can very much imagine this dynamic. But long story short, what do I want to say is, as a game designer, even if you have this very strong idea of, I'm going to design for hard fun, I'm going to give this person first that experience of frustration, then I'm going to do this tension relief and fiero in this and da. You can never directly design the experience. In the end, it's really very much an individual personal experience, and what you as a game designer may have as an intent, how you think a game will be experienced, you never control, because different people simply like different things. Yes, people are very different, and that's that idea of game design. These experiences, you don't control them as a game designer, but you want to, because that in the end, giving the right experience to your players will define the success of your game. So it's really important. And that's what game user research is all about. In the end, it's really about understanding, does the game designer's intent, the intended experiences that he wants to give to the player, is that actually the case? Does my intention as a designer match up with the experiences that that player have, knowing that I can never really control what that other person will experience, and knowing that different people will experience games very differently. All right. Given a long introduction, I have no idea, have you already talked about that? So maybe you already thought by yourself, I know this. Yes, we know it's the MDA framework. So I'm just pointing that out to you. What I've been saying here basically maps on directly to the MDA framework. And so that means and theory framework, really, it's totally independent, because means and theory originates from consumer science, marketing, psychology, but there you have the theoretical foundation for the MDA framework. And again, you can see that here. In the end, you as a game designer, you have control over the attributes, but you want to give certain consequences to the player. You can still control that to a certain extent with your game. You cannot control the values of your player, or most of the time. Yes. So basically, this is the MDA framework. Yes. You notice, you have seen this before. So this is your job as a designer, trying to match what you are designing with the experience from the players. Okay, so game user research. What do game user researchers then need to do? Well, they need to investigate. Does that intent match? And we need empirical support. Yes, and I very much like this sentence, but it's quite a complex sentence. Provide empirical support on how game design decisions manifest themselves in real players. The key here is empirical support and also real players. Actually, what does that mean, empirical support? Anyone who dares to answer? Yes.
Real examples and statistical data.
Yeah, absolutely that. So thank you for that answer. So basically, it means that you cannot just from your desk, from your laptop, read about it, read a lot of blog posts on whatever, My Days, Game Sutra. Is that still? the most read, and then say, okay, I've done everything I can because I've read all these posts and look, I've used the nicest tooling and blah blah blah, so I'm sure it will be fine. No, you need to go out. You really need to go out, observe or do things in the real world with real players. Game user research, you have a lot of different methods. Can you, what are possible methods that you could use to get empirical support? Yes.
For example, invite people to use just play the game.
Yeah.
And then make an interview or asking questions afterwards.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, play testing, have them come in, and afterwards ask them questions. Yes. Others? Yeah.
Like collecting data, like the points where people die and make a heat map out of it.
Yeah. So we log player metrics and then we do that kind of analytics. Yeah, perfect. So indeed, there's different methods to collect empirical support, player observations, interviews, metrics, biometrics. We can even hook these people up. We can measure galvanic skin response, maybe heart rate. Maybe we can even put some EMG measurement and see if they smile or frown. But we can also just use something very basically, surveys, good old surveys, yes? Because you can do interviews completely open, depth interviews, whatever they say goes, but we can also use surveys. And so the remainder of this talk will be about, well, okay, if we have surveys, what do you need to think about? And then I will also introduce you to one possible survey, the player experience inventory. So sometimes it's good to start with a definition. I want to make sure we're all on the same page. What is a survey? A survey is a series of formatted questions delivered to a defined sample of people. That's a survey. Sometimes they also use the word questionnaire. I've had already long debates about whether there is a difference between survey and questionnaire. I think questionnaire is used a little bit more strictly, but there's no official definition. But what I find important is that we all understand that it's about questions that have been formatted beforehand. So it's not open. Once you start a survey, you cannot sort of improvise. Yes, maybe you have certain flows, but everything has been pre-formatted. And also the way people can answer, of course, you can have a couple of open boxes that they can type in their answers, but even then you have pre-specified that this is one where it's an open rich text field, basically. Right? But that's all been specified beforehand. That's what we're talking about today with surveys. And computer science students generally love surveys. Why? Because you can prepare it beforehand, and it is very controlled. Yes. But just to make sure that we're all clear. Okay. Now, again, a question for you. If you had 11 questions to ask in your survey, you want to understand the player experience that someone has, what would you ask? We've just shown you how vastly elaborated it is. You have to now come up with 11 questions. Yeah. You can take a bit of writing or some notes, some scribbles, because I want you to take a minute and then discuss it with each other again. If you don't come to 11, that's fine, but just think about what would I definitely put in that survey. I have until 11, right?
I always yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no. Double checking. Okay, how's it going? 11 questions, please sit next to each other, exchange. You are now going to create the best survey ever, but it can only have 11 questions. Why is that? Well, we'll come to that towards the end again. I will revisit it, but people hate filling out surveys. So they don't like it. Okay, how are you doing? More or less some ideas of items? Okay, from the back row there. I could see you had some intense debates, so I want to hear some items. What would you ask?
Was there any point in the game where you had some problems with some obstacles to go further, like you didn't know naturally what to do?
Okay.
Okay, naturally, okay, I have to go
And what would
further.
be your answer format? An open text box?
No, there wasn't.
You didn't think about it. I also didn't ask that of you, so it's very unfair of me to ask you that now on the spot. But now, yeah. Yeah, so the number. At how many points during the game did you feel you could not continue? I'm going to come back to that example.
Here's another one.
You have another one, okay, yes.
Yeah, what ideas did emerge after playing the game? So not asking directly the feelings, but asking sort of more abstract forms.
Okay, what ideas emerge after the game? Interesting. Answer formats?
Open form.
Yes, all right. Yes.
Maybe something like how much did you enjoy your experience, or how difficult was some task for you?
Okay.
You can give a scale from, I don't know, 1 to 5.
Yeah. All right. How difficult did you experience the game to be, or something?
This would be very which might be interesting to us.
Okay. Yes. Well, first, and then I come back to you. But yeah.
How likely are you to adhere to the next playtesting session on a scale of 1 to 6?
Okay. Yes. Okay. Interesting. Yes. All right.
Yeah, I would ask if they felt that the session was meaningful for them, like that they achieved anything for themselves, not only in the game.
Okay. Meaning. Okay. I like that a lot. How meaningful was the game to you? Yes.
Were there many points that are unpleasant to you from strongly agree, strongly disagree, and then it's frustrating.
And so would you hope that some points are frustrating, or would you hope it's not?
Depends on the game. For example, the unpleasant part, if it's a horror game, I might want it to be unpleasant while in a happy cozy game.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay. And what would be the answer format?
From strongly agree with you, strongly disagree. So did it happen often or not so often?
Yeah. So it would be something like, I had many frustrating experiences, and then they have to agree with that statement. Okay. And so with your horror game, you would hope that they would answer, I strongly agree that I had many frustrating experiences.
Horror not necessarily frustrating, more unpleasant is the
yeah.
question, but depending on the horror game, it can also be to a degree frustrating.
Okay.
Feel less in control.
Yeah.
So it's more like a nightmare.
Okay. So we would debate a little bit on would the word frustrating or unpleasant, what would be the right word, and depending on the game, you would want a different type of place on the scale.
I mean, those are two separate questions.
Yeah, okay. Yes, yeah. All right. Yes.
Maybe trying to compare it to a baseline experience, something outside the game.
Yeah.
Is it better or worse than sleeping?
Okay. Compared to the fact that you also could be sleeping right now, were you happier? Did you enjoy that you played the game? Yeah, okay, interesting. Okay, yes. Any other ideas? Any other? Yeah. Sorry, first you, and then I come back to you. Yes.
Maybe asking for the input, like how well did the input feel?
How easy was it to control the game? Something like that?
Scale from 1 to 10.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. And from what number would you be happy? Would a 7 out of 10 be good enough?
I think it depends. If you make a game that has really frustrating input on purpose, I mean, those games exist.
Okay.
You maybe want it to be very low, but I think that for most games, you want to have a baseline of like 7 or higher.
Okay, so it has to be. We're going for the games where you just want that to work properly. So 7 or higher would be okay. How do you know that?
I mean, that would be compared. That would need comparison to other games.
Okay, so you would need other games that you want to be as good at least, and you want to know their scores, so you have a benchmark and you can compare.
Yeah, you need a baseline for that to actually make sense.
Yeah. All right. Yes. Okay. Yeah, you first. Yes. Sorry. How much could you express yourself in a game? Okay. Nice. Yes. All right. Yeah. And then yes, you.
I want to make a counterpoint for the controls. You want to ask if people notice the controls, because in a good game, people just don't notice them. And if I don't notice something, I'd be very inclined to give it a 5 out of 10, because I can't say I didn't notice, but that's basically a perfect score in this regard.
Interesting. So you're saying, honestly, if I give a 5 out of 10, that means that it works. So you say that 7 is too high.
Yes, because then they actively thought about the controls, which they shouldn't.
Yes.
Mostly. If you're making a control-based game, then yes, if you're getting over it, then yes, you should notice the controls. But if you're playing a shooter, you should
I'm going to tell you a small anecdote about that Net Promoter Score that I just, that one item that asks, how likely are you to recommend this game to a friend? Yes. We know from international research that you want to score 8, 9 of 10. Yes. 6 or 7 is neutral. And if you score 5 or less, these are detractors. So the ones that give 8 to 10 are promoters. They will promote your game. The 6, 7s will not do much. And 5 or less, they will detract. They will advise against your game. Yes. But there are regional differences. There are cultural differences. And among Germans, if you score a 7, that's also already fine. And this is really true, eh? This is just, yeah. And I think Belgians, I'm a Belgian. I think we're very much like the Germans. But just saying, it's not that easy to understand what a 5 or a 6 or a 7 is. Yeah. All right, thank you. You don't have to do that now, but actually I include here, and we'll end the lecture also with revisiting this specific questionnaire. But we have one with 11 items. They're quite different from the items that you said. That doesn't mean anything. It's indeed very much depends on the situation. But yeah, you can look that up again afterwards. All right, but so yeah, surveys, it's very important to keep in mind that they are self-reports. They are subjective data, yes. People are reporting on data. You can ask a lot of things. You can just ask for very basic socio-demographic information first. What is your birth date? Where do you live? You can ask on what console did you play the game, these kinds of things. But you understand that player experience, it's very much sort of in these range, and with functional consequences, we are still at behaviors. And there at the back row, you were talking about, can you say at what level or how often you had to stop? And then you're really asking for a behavior, right? So you have to think about that. What do you want to ask? What are the answer formats? As you can imagine, and we just talked about that, it's going to be much easier to say something about on what console did you play the game. That's objective data. And I can say PlayStation, Xbox, whatever, yes. But if it's about this subjective, that already becomes much harder. And we were just talking even about at that level of controlling, like what does a 5 mean? What does a 7 mean? How should we interpret that? We also talked about frustrations. No, unpleasant. Oh, that means something different. But will players perceive that as different, or will frustration be unpleasant? And it becomes much harder. Yes. But never forget that it is in the end what people decide to share with you. It's self-reports, and definitely when it's about player experience, this is highly subjective. Yes. And so it's also good to know when not to use surveys. And there are quite a lot of reasons why you would not want to use a survey. And the first thing is when you want to assess something that people cannot report about themselves. And I would argue that the question, can you say at how many levels you were stopped, that would be one that you would not want to ask via survey. Then metrics work well. You can just log where they are blocked. Yes. Because the reality is, while people are playing a game, they don't really memorize that behavior. They don't really count. Of course, if it's only at one location, that's still fine. But if it's like a long, drawn-out game, it will be very difficult. The same argument there about controllers, I thought it was an interesting one, because the argument was, if the controllers work well, I won't reflect on having used them, so I won't be able to say much about it. That's true. Behaviors are difficult to remember, and there's also a lot of stuff that that you cannot report on. Here, maybe you dislike a game because subconsciously it triggers something that really doesn't sit well with you. You're not going to get at that via self-reports. Yes, it's subjective, but it's also assuming that people can analyze and can articulate that feeling. Behaviors that are poorly remembered, we actually just discussed that, but everything that has to do with this sort of like, can you describe how it's very difficult. If you play a kind of sports, it's much easier to say, okay, but let me show you how you do that. But to put that in words in a survey, in this pre-formatted, either the pre-format is not going to be right, or that open text box, then you have to do a lot of typing. It's also going to be not really ideal. And then behaviors or attitudes that are sensitive, maybe people don't want to share that with you. for example, and this is actually an item from a real experience I had during my PhD, and it was about hyperrealism, but it got into these very weird types of interviews where it was a certain kind of semi-structured interview, but I had to keep on asking why. And so people would say, well, I like, that this, hyper realistic and violence. And then I sort of had to say, like, why do you like a game where the violence and some shocking events are really hyper realistic? And these respondents, I placed them in a very awkward spot. And the interview became very like, actually, this doesn't work. This is not okay. Yeah. That becomes just weird. And then finally, there's also something like social desirability. People, some things are sensitive to share, and they also want to make a good impression. Even if it's anonymous, there will be this kind of bias to say what you want to hear, especially if you do interviews where there is still a kind of power balance, or they're not really sure it's truly anonymous. I also did a lot of research with smaller children, and there you had that very much, and you would just have surveys where the child would write, because I like you, and that's not what I want to hear, but they're trying to please you. Yes, and that effect maybe not always as obvious, but it still also takes place when you are working with adults. Yes, it's not gone. So surveys definitely have their limitations. So we've just discussed that there's issues with surveys. They seem really nice. Yes, they seem quite often very safe, but there's a lot of reasons why not to use surveys. And actually, even when creating these items, thinking about how to word the items, how to make sure that they're not misleading, is not easy. If you are going to create an item, and I couldn't come up with a correct item right away, but sort of an item like when there's sort of things in the game or in that situation, how do you feel about the mistreatment of older adults in the game? Again, that social desirability, that awkward formulation, like how are you still going to answer that when there's already that word mistreatment? That's already an opinion. Maybe that person that played the game did not really think about it yet as mistreatment, or saw it differently. Yes? So it's very hard not to be sort of leading, but also something like how much did you play, especially with things like gaming. People tend to lower the number of hours, and then still, you will still see that people tend to underestimate. So making, again, correct estimations about behaviors that maybe also have some social desirability. It's hard to get good estimations and honest estimations. Yes. And then what I also want to emphasize, well, you've got this data that you want to keep, but you can now think about them as variables, variables such as gender, and then you have levels of measurement. You have to think about that. We already, through the examples, talked about that. Is everything going to be an open answer format? Then maybe it's better to just sit together and do a face-to-face unstructured interview, because if all your items are going to be open format, then it's not a survey. A survey implies pre-formatting of the answers as well. Yes. If everything is open, of course, you can mix a little bit, but if everything is open, it's not a survey. But so you have to think about that. All right, am I going to ask, and I think you already had courses on statistics, but it's coming all back now, right? The categorical variables, and they can be nominal, they can be dichotomous, yes, no, or ordinal. and ordinal is actually most used with player experience. So indeed, these kind of statements that express a kind of attitude, and then how much do you agree? But you can also still have items where you use continuous variables, and then you can think about interval and ratio and all coming back. But I still want to discuss something else, and I want to put forward another complex term here before we go into an example. So this is the last sort of concept that I want to throw in here about the scientific statistical analysis of survey data, especially of player experiences. So again, we talked about subjective, objective, but there's also a kind of other way of looking at it. And some variables, they are manifest. You can measure them directly. For example, how many enemies did you shoot? Yes. What console do you play with? But when we talk about player experience, we have a lot of what they call latent variables. And latent variables you actually cannot measure directly. An item like how much flow did you experience? Yeah. How do you answer that? 5, 7. You're a German. I take 5. Good enough. Huh? Okay. But like, and then that already assumes that people know what flow is. So you've got this paradox, because actually, if you want to get at these experiences, it's actually not going to go through these metrics. Through metrics, you will not be able to infer whether your users actually had moments of awe and wonder. So you have to ask them, but at the same time, I'm telling you that those types of experiences are really hard to measure because they are latent. So what do you have to do as a player experience researcher? You actually have to think about, okay, but how am I going to ask items that a user can answer? And actually, yeah, I was going to ask you that. I hope you didn't read it yet, but how would you reword this in a kind of item that a player can answer? How would you do that? Yes.
Like, did you forget the time while playing?
Okay.
That could indicate that you were so immersed.
I love your suggestion. Did you forget the time while you were playing? Because that's something that a player can answer, indeed. Nice, very nice. Other one. Yes.
How long did it take until the game clicked? That's a bit more of a layman's term, I think.
Okay, yes. And I'm, for both of you, I find it interesting, and also thinking about the answer format, because I'm seeing, like, do we measure in minutes or hours, or?
I give a percentage of the play time.
Yeah. All right. Yes. Yeah.
Maybe if forgot to satisfy some other needs, like
Yeah. Okay. Did you forget to attend to other important things?
yeah, not like important things in the meeting from research, like other things.
Yeah.
Like other natural.
Yeah. Did you lose track of the other things going around that were happening?
Yeah, but it's more like about the negative things that you have to do, like when you're just sitting alone and you have to go to the toilet.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're getting it, but we're still having difficulties sort of wording it right. Yeah. But I like it, and you see, here is also suggestions. Thinking like these are things that a player can answer. Still, if we do that on the ordinal scale, we say maybe we make it as an attitudinal item. So you basically say, I lost track of myself during the game, and then on a scale from 1 to 5, how much did you agree? Like as Dimi said, what would be a correct score? 5? Do we take 5? This is already sort of answerable, but still difficult to sort of interpret. So this process of taking these latent variables, and player experience is all about latent variables, and sort of operationalizing them, well, sort of transforming them in something that players can answer and where there is a kind of meaningful outcome, that's what we call operationalization. And you know, you do want sort of a benchmarking, but what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and how can I make sure that these participants that are going to fill out the survey, that they actually understand the item in the same way that I want? How do I know that I've chosen the right answer, the right pre-formatted answer options? A lot of work, yes. So the bottom line is that creating good surveys is really, really, really hard. Yes. This is not a survey that says, okay, how many people live in your household? How big is your house? Player experience, it's this fuzzy, multidimensional, dynamic construct, and it's full of latent variables, making it really hard to measure through surveys. And at the same time, we really need surveys to get at these subjective experiences. So what is my recommendation to you? Use at least partly validated questionnaires. None of the validated questionnaires will offer you everything you need. Yes, there will be also always certain things that you want to ask that are really very specific to your game situation, target group, and so on. But at least there are scales out there where researchers have done already a lot of the hard work. They've already worked on that operationalization, and they've already made sure that players understand the items in the right way. Yes, and you can make use of it. So I've put a couple on them. Now going to talk about the player experience inventory. So this is one of the scales that I gave this lengthy explanation about. Means end theory is not a coincidence, because it is a scale that measures at these both levels. It asks at the same time, did you find these controllers easy to use? But it also asks, did you get a sense of mastery? And the fact that you have one scale that measures at these different levels allows you to see, is there a connection between them? It was validated with 64 game experts. So we asked a lot of game experts for their input. What do you want to measure? There are a lot of player experiences that are also very specific to a certain genre, but that don't carry over. So we also really try to look for those concepts that you can find in all games or gamified experiences. We also validated it with 529 players. So we did a lot of statistical checks. I'm not going to go into detail today about what discriminant and convergent validity is and how you compute that. But basically it means that we know that what we want to measure, that we are measuring that specific concept. And there's in total, there are 10 constructs that they really are measuring something differently, that they're not measuring the same thing over and over. And at the same time, we have 10 constructs, but only 3 items. When you have a latent variable, you're actually going to ask it a couple of times. And together, based on these different items, you're going to measure that latent variable. So we do it with 3 only. That is actually a very economical way of measuring it. So these are the benefits of the scale. These are the items. So it measures at the functional consequences, ease of control, the controllers, how did that work? Progress feedback, do you actually know what you're doing? And do you know you're doing well or not? The audiovisual appeal, the clarity of goals. So did you actually know what you had to do in the game? And was it well balanced? Did the challenge sit at the right level? And then you have these psychosocial consequences. Did it give you a sense of mastery, of curiosity, immersion, autonomy, and meaning? So you can see certain elements that were actually mentioned today also come back here. So that's what the scale provides you. Using a validated scale also allows you to use those benchmarks and compare against other games. Yeah, here are some items. I will come back to the benchmarking in a moment. So here you see for the concept of interest, curiosity, mastery, and immersion. They're measured on a 7-point Likert scale. And what is important is that there is this neutral point in the middle. So you do want to be on the positive side. Yes. If you have no benchmark data, at least you know that you want to be on this side. You know, if you are in a negative side, that is an issue. And actually, there's a website that comes with this instrument. After this lecture, you can take a look at the website. I forgot to put the QR code on here as well, but you should be able to find it. It's not too hard to see the web address. And maybe nice for you to know, it's also translated in a couple of languages, among which in German. So you have a German version of this instrument. The nice thing is that if you make use of validated instruments, you also get access to prior measurements, and so you also have benchmark data. So let me show that here. If you go to the website, you can also look up how other games scored. So you can sort of say, okay, I want an action-adventure game. I want scores of female players, and you can see how certain games scored on certain constructs. So you can compare your game to others, because otherwise, indeed, what does that 5 mean, or the average of 0.13? Well, you can look up how your game sits comparing it to other games. And then finally, there's the mini PXI. There's also a shorter instrument, because we did notice, even though we felt that one of the strengths of this survey is that it's very economical, we still got complaints from people from industry saying that 30 items is way too long. People are not going to fill it out. When being in the context, for example, of being at a trade fair and you have a game at your booth and you want people walking by to play the game and then quickly fill out a survey, 30 items, it's not going to happen. Yeah, especially if you still want to ask a couple of other things as well, like what region they live or what console they use, they prefer, and so on. So we worked on a shorter version, where we took one item for each of these constructs, yes, and we tested it. It does work, yes, and here you can see data from a recent study where we actually asked to compare different iterations of a game, because if you are going to be in game designing, you will also you want to quickly test multiple iterations of your game, and you want to see whether it improves. And again, there, 30 items, that's a lot to ask of your testers again and again and again. So with these 10 items, you can already map and see whether your first version of the game, which is in pink, versus your, which is in blue, whether it improves against the second iteration of your game, which is in pink. And in that way, you can see like, okay, apparently our game here is scoring better. So you also see the abbreviations here. Each dot is meaning, progress feedback, immersion, curiosity, autonomy. Yeah, here's progress feedback, narrative goals, ease of controlling, challenge. So you can find these items and you can see in that way quickly that your game is improving. All right. with that, I am coming to the end of my talk. I hope that this sort of enlightened you, that you now feel inspired, that you understand what you would want to measure with a survey and what not. And then I will thank you and will gladly take questions as well. That's nice. Questions? Yes.
What happened to relatedness?
Relatedness we took out because this is the way different games implement relatedness is highly different. Multiplayer games, single player games, collocated gameplay, remote gameplay. So that is already an issue. And then, of course, that concept of relatedness, even that, is it relating to your co-players or is it relating to the main character? And that was such a fuzzy construct that we actually intentionally did not include it because we would never be able to use 3 items and make it work across all games. So we would need then variants for everything that I just said. This is where you need to complement the skill. So in that respect, it just didn't go there because that's not universal across different games and genres. Yeah, but yeah, spot on. Yeah. All right. Yes.
I've heard in the past that if you make a survey, you should leave out the neutral position because then players will get that, participants will get better answers.
Yeah.
Did you seem to be more of an expert?
Yes.
Did you also hear this?
Yeah, I'm an expert, and I would say I'm an empirical expert. I have already taken and analyzed so many skills and data, and also devised my couple of skills. This is a highly debated topic. So what you are saying, there's no agreement on it. And I think the reality why there is no agreement on it is because there's also a principle as garbage in, garbage out. And if you force people to give an answer that is not according to what they actually want to answer, they will get upset. They will have to choose something that maybe they are neutral and you're forcing them to take a point. And this also affects the other items in your survey. So from my real world experience, I understand the whole reasoning. And maybe there are situations in which you are evaluating things where there's no meaningful neutral anyhow, because they always have an opinion. And then maybe there's an argument to be made for saying, but you have to take sides. But in these contexts, I would strongly advise against that, because you will get, it will impact your measurement. I have another strong pet peeve, and that's negatively wording items. And I know that a lot of academic scholars find it important that you measure twice the same thing, but also in reverse by negatively formulating an item. I have found over and over and over again that inserting negative items completely ruins your surveys. People don't take the mental energy to, most of them read over the not, or well, most of them, quite a big portion misses a not, even if you put it in bold, in capitals, underscore, yeah, they will have missed it. And the others, it's just complex and you're draining energy. And we have to fill out so many surveys. We're so tired with filling out surveys that making it intentionally harder on your user to fill it out is a bad idea. Yeah.
Follow-up question: would you consider, if the sample size is large enough, just deleting all the neutrals and just ignoring them in data evaluation, so that you can have the same effect, but without frustrating the participants?
But you are transforming your data then, eh? So I think, I don't know why you would want it, but I don't see the use for it, because you're measuring at a certain level of granularity, and then you're saying, I'm going to compute or take that out of my data to force, then I would say, but yeah, what you are looking for is a kind of binary treatment. You can still leave the answers in, but then do a kind of analysis at the group level, or maybe do a logistic regression if you want to find that. But I would never take it out of the original data. Yeah.
That was because, so that was with the same reasoning, because the assumption is that the people who are answering neutral is often garbage data.
Okay, yeah,
yeah. So
I have a better way for you to do that. And I took it out because, yeah, I ran out of time, and I also thought that I would run out of time here. But you always, or you want to include control questions. And the control questions are, please select 0. Yes, or please select 3. And those people that are just going like, there you put in certain items. So if you read this item, please select 3, and then you know you can take those out. So it is very important that you have these kind of measures, but differently from what you are suggesting. Yeah.
Could you include maybe another answer option? For example, I don't understand this question, or I don't know how to answer this question.
They're not applicable, Oriana. If you create items yourself, and so it's not validated, I would really consider that if there may be this like sort of, or always put an open box that they can add. I have no idea what you're trying to measure here, but blah blah blah. Yes.
In the interest of time,
I have to wrap up.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much for your talk. We will now end the fun thing to actually do a survey.
Do you want me to stop recording? Or?
Yes. I can just